Let me throw this one at you, John, because another way that more recently I've been seeing the use of the word relevance is simply around scale, around mass.
Mm.
That there's a belief that credit unions, in many cases smaller institutions than their national or even regional bank rivals, must grow rapidly. How do you feel about that? Is there also a mandate effectively in the market for much larger institutions?
You know, we started this conversation talking about the industrial, and environmental factors that gave rise to DeLand, right? 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago. And I said they're not the same as they are now, right? And so I think that we're currently facing, so let me sharpen that a little bit. 10 years ago, I used to hear this word economies of scale all the time, right? And that was the buzzword for any consultant. I'm going to help you get economies of scale. You've got to move towards economies of scale. And I think that fueled a lot of consolidation and conglomeration, and it's yet to be seen whether that was really anything other than cannibalism in our industry. But I think we're seeing a new set of industrial and economic factors right now, compressed into what we're calling the COVID pandemic, right, and the associated economic crisis. And I think the best answer I can give you there is I don't imagine that when the true impact of the COVID shutdown to our economy is understood. In other words, when we really start to see the ripple effect of this economically, and we get, more than 90 days removed from massive injection of stimulus into our economy, I don't imagine that it's going to be the community financial institutions that are pulling back from the front lines. I think that the community financial institutions will be in the trenches with the communities and the consumers. I do imagine that it's the large, conglomerated, hyper-centralized institutions. I don't need to name them by brand. Everybody knows who they are. There are 5 of them, right? I believe those 5 will be the ones that pull back, because that's the ethics of, and the physics of, and the economics of, economies of scale. So I think economies of scale worked, from the mid 2000s till now, because you can really track the idea of that. You can track that construct, economies of scale, alongside the growth of the overall economy. But I think we're going to witness an interesting onset of a new era here, where there's, the implosion of the underlying dynamics that support economies of scale. And I anticipate we'll see those large players pull back, scale back, pull out of communities, which is tragic, because it will be at precisely the moment that the communities and the consumers and the businesses need their presence, which will, of course, expose their hypocrisy and everything that credit unions believe about those types of institutions. So I don't believe that the goal of operating a financial institution should be economies of scale. I think it should be engagement, sustainability, relevance, financial flourishing in a community. And more than that, I think we're going to see an era here where the environmental and industrial factors surrounding financial institutions require a smaller size in order to be able to be dynamic, to adapt, to engage uniquely, right? Engage the challenges that one localized community is having versus another localized community. And that's a real challenge for an economies of scale model, I think.
All right, so small is beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's all, it's cyclical, right? Yin yang, the seeds of the opposite are inside of this whole trend of the last 10 years. So, I get asked all the time, candidly, why in the world would you sell your business to a $500 million credit union? I just gave the answer, right? Because I believe that a lot of those types of institutions is the way that we preserve localized freedom and flourishing and democracy and fair access to financial services in the future. I don't think we do it through continued cannibalism of our industry.
Right. So in this pandemic, in this really rough time, and I think you made a good point that the ramifications, the ripple effects, we haven't hit those yet.
Right.
There's still a lot of, whatever, like the waters in the background, I'll say rough sailing,
Mhm.
ahead of us. But you really clearly, John, said that it's going to be local, community-based, mission-based institutions that are going to be there on the front line to take the steps, whatever they can, whatever is needed to get through these next hurdles. Is that how you see it?
Well, what I specifically said a moment ago is that I think different communities are going to face localized challenges, right?
Right.
So I think that's the underlying dynamic that's going to drive relevance in the future. So, in so much as I believe that localized communities are going to face specific, localized challenges, I believe that the community financial institution can, I'm not saying it will, we could really screw this up like we screwed up Occupy Wall Street back in '08, right? The local institution can position itself to address those challenges and to provide products and services and to rethink language and product delivery and value delivery in this moment. I don't believe that we'll be able to depend upon vendors to do that for us, right? And that's another reason that we reformatted our business as a QSO a few years ago was frankly in anticipation of this kind of environment. We wanted to be a true strategic partner to the institutions themselves. I think our industry has a really detrimental or devastating track record of outsourcing our business to vendors and thinking that X, Y, or Z platform or technology package is going to solve the problems of our business, and I don't think that's the case. I think in the near future, emphasis on near, we're looking at needing to have really radical conversations with communities and consumers about what they need, right? And what they desire, and what's an existential crisis that they're facing, and what kind of digital tools could help them have a shot at surviving. And I don't think that the economies of scale model, going back to the prior question, that the large vendors operate on is going to support the pace of innovation and strategic development that's needed in the near future. So I think the local call it smaller if you want, institution, if they get serious about controlling and protecting their community data and positioning themselves as an advocate for and a steward of that consumer data in their community, position themselves as epicenters of local transaction networks, position themselves as epicenters of storing new types of financial data that consumers are going to need to safeguard, then they'll be in a better position to be relevant than the big players. Does that answer your question, Matt?